Today, we're going to explore color, deep, intense color inspired by a color cube card. See how I create the colors on the card and what I do when I don't get it right the first time. I'll also share some of my favorite paper painting techniques with you so you can try new things in your mixed media art. I'm Jackie Bernardi, and welcome to my studio. Autumn always gets me excited to work with more intense and deep colors than I do any other time of the year. And I always look forward to it, kind of like I look forward to going to Staples during back to school time. I just love it. It's all possibilities. So Sarah Renee Clark, the developer of the color cubes, came out with a new edition. Originally, there were two cubes that housed, I think, 500 color cards. She's now expanded it to four cubes to 1,000 color cards. And these cards are fantastic in helping you dial in colors that you might want to use in a piece. Now, I decided to use one of the volumes that I had not had before. I had volumes 1 and 2 for years, and now I have a complete set. I have volumes 3 and 4 as well. And what I love about the new volumes is that she has separated all the cards into categories. And you can see here, for each category, there's a category card with all the images, all the color cards that are in that category. So you can scan that quickly to pick one you like. And I did just that. This is the breathtaking sunsets category of the color cube. And from that front page that showed all the cards, I was able to pick one. This is card number 507, and I think it's gorgeous. These colors are hitting all the right notes for me today. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to attempt to recreate these colors just using a few paints that I have in my stash. Now, before I pick the colors that I want to try to accomplish this with, I'm really taking a deep look at this card and seeing how in the image the colors work together. Now, if you flip the card over, there's actually all these colors again, but she includes the hex code for each one. And then on the other side of the card, she actually has it tinted and shaded so that you can see from adding a little white to adding a little black what you'll get with these colors. So I love that. So these are the colors that I am going to restrict myself to using today to make the colors on the card. There's Van Dyke Brown, there's teal, primary cyan, pyrrole red, hooker's green, cadmium yellow, and this is the deep hue. I'm going to use some Mars black and some titanium white. Now, I'm going to say at the front of this project, these are probably not the best colors I could have chosen to do this exercise. I mean, I have a vast amount of colors to choose from in my stash. However, I can't get to all of them right now because of the studio refresh that is going on. But also, I wanted to show you something by doing this exercise, and that is so long as you're somewhere in the field of colors that you may be creating, you can pretty much use any color to get to the colors you want. It's just a matter of patience and exploration. And so that's what we're going to do today. Now, I started off with this hooker's green. It's a very intense and opaque green, and it takes a lot to knock it down. So I mixed in some teal with that, and now I'm bringing in some of that cyan to get to the darkest color on this color card. So that would be the fifth card in from the left, second one to the end. That's a really dark, dark teal is actually what she named it on the color card, but it's a very dark and intense color. Now, the easy thing would be to just mix a whole bunch of that green and some teal and put in a ton of black, right? That would be very easy. However, just doing that, you are not likely to get to the color that is actually on the card. You'd get close, but not exactly there. So if you use a little tiny bit of black mixed in, you can ramp up to the color you want to be at. So I am going to let that color sit for a minute. Remember, when you work with acrylic paints, some of the colors have a tendency to dry darker than they are when they are wet. And I'm not trying to set a land speed record here, so I can take my time in developing the colors. And if I need to wait for colors to dry to see if they are working or not, I will do that. But in the meantime, while that is setting up, I'm going to go ahead and create this other teal color that is on the card, the last block of color on the card. And what I am doing is creating in the upper right-hand corner of this color mixing sheet, I am just creating my own graph of colors based on what I am seeing on this card. Okay, so the exercise here is learning how to blend and navigate the colors that you see out in the world and then bringing them into your art. So I'm using the color cube cards. You could use other images. You could take pictures that you have in your camera, and you can do a very similar exercise. The nice thing about the colored cards are they're heavy duty and they hold up to a lot. So now that I think I have the two green blue colors, I am going to move on now to working into these reds and oranges. And the reason why I put Van Dyke Brown down on this paper is this. Black is very polarizing when you mix it in with colors. However, Van Dyke Brown can be the dark element that you need in a color to tone down the brightness of the color and yet still maintain the integrity of that color. So in this case, I started mixing the Pyrrole Red actually with the Van Dyke Brown instead of black. And that's how I got this rich, mm, I I don't even know what to call this color. I forget what it's called on the card right now, but this brownish red color. And the Van Dyke Brown was exactly the right thing for that. But when you look at the color on the card, you would not necessarily automatically think Van Dyke Brown. It takes practicing and exploring with colors to get to the point where you get sort of a spidey sense for the colors needed to mix. So I have obviously sped up the time lapse here because color mixing does take quite a long time. And it's about as fun as watching paint dry. So I sped it up, but I'm going to slow it down right now so I can show you how nuanced color mixing can be. All right, so I'm trying to make this light peach color, and it was just feeling so hot. So I took some teal, actual teal, and I put it in with this combination of pyrrole red, the cadmium yellow hue, some white, a little tiny bit of Van Dyke Brown, and then I put in the teal to tone it down, and it worked a charm. The blue tones in the teal started to negate some of the really hot red tones, and that's how I was able to get to this peach color, and it's pretty darn close to that card. Right, now that I have the colors, I'm going to start playing with them on the other sheet of paper. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the image on the card as an inspiration. I'm not trying to copy the image on the card, uh, but I do love the way that the colors are playing on the card. And so I'm going to, like I said, use it as inspiration. This is not going to be a direct match. But what I am going to do is I'm going to start by laying in what I consider to be the background of this photo. And so I'm going to go in and I'm mixing some of these reds and oranges just to start filling in that sky element. I'm using the Catalyst wedge because I think you all know by now I absolutely adore the Catalyst wedge and it is an extension of my hand. However, the real reason why I'm using it in this exercise is because I am interested in creating sort of a chunky, textured, abstracted version of this image. And for me, the easiest way to get that chunky texture is to use the Catalyst wedge and kind of skip trowel it or skip wedge it across the paper with the different colors that I created for this color card. Right. And so as they're wet and as I'm moving them around, something you need to remember is that acrylic paints will dry very, very quickly, particularly if you are using a Catalyst wedge to move them around. So I do not have very much time to work the color into the various layers. So what will happen is later on, I will come back in and finesse some of that. But for right now, I just want to get broad strokes of the color in. I'm not worried about how this is going to look in the final result right now. All I'm doing is laying the foundation for many layers to come in later. And what I'm trying to do is use pretty much all the colors that we created in this process and just putting them down. Whether I get it right or wrong right now truly does not matter because each subsequent layer will make a difference. Now you can see with this Catalyst wedge, I'm not only scraping it back and forth and using it like that, I'm also going ahead and I'm pushing paint into areas. So here, this is scraping that you see me do right now. And the nice thing about scraping is that sometimes you can get what's underneath to show up so that it just skim coats the paint on it, and that's always lovely. But when you push it, you're being more intentional about where the paint is landing. So if you watch right now, I'm going to start pushing this into place, right? And I captured some of that cadmium yellow, and that is off. That is wrong. If you can see that in the middle over to the right-ish, that dark blue sky now has this weird yellow haze in it, which is not at all part of the inspiration picture. And also, by the way, not at all part of what I want on this image. So all it takes is a moment or two to let that off color dry so that when I went over it, I completely covered it without scraping back and seeing that color below. Now, what I'm doing here is a combination of pushing and pulling, or pushing and scraping the Catalyst wedge. One of the things that I love about the Catalyst wedge is it has many different angles that you can use to create shape. And by pushing, I'm creating shape. Now, I've let this dry for a couple hours, and I can very clearly see now that it's dry that my blue colors really are favoring green. And so I need to fix that because a green sky usually means tornado. That's not the effect that I'm going for here. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to rework those last two colors. Now that I know what happens when this is drying for these two colors, I'm going to go in and try to rework it. Now, I've got to tell you, this cyan blue makes me crazy. It truly makes me crazy. And even though it's highly pigmented paint, it's so weak compared to the other colors I chose. Now, again, as I said earlier, I did not pick the best colors to do this exercise from my stash. I just picked colors that generally matched the color family. The reason why I did that is because I want to show to you that you do not have to have the perfect colors to create colors. You can get to the colors you want to if you just have a few colors to help you navigate that. That Van Dyke Brown is one of them. I will tell you that Payne's Gray is certainly one of them, although I'm not using Payne's Gray in this exercise. So that when I came back in to fix the blues, or excuse me, to fix the greens and actually turn them into the blue that is more similar to the inspiration card, I knew that I had to go heavy with the cyan blue and Van Dyke Brown and black, right, to get there. And also, believe it or not, a touch of the titanium white. Not really to tint it, but just to take the edge off so it wasn't so black. Now, as we're moving on in the layers, I am starting to use other tools besides the catalyst wedge. This is where things get more nuanced. So I'm using just a plain chip brush here to smooth out the edges from the catalyst wedge. I don't really want perfectly smoothed paint. However, I don't want to see the hard marks that the catalyst wedge can create. So one way to manage that is to go ahead and take your a chip brush or really any paintbrush and very gently brush it out so that the hard edge of the line is reduced and modeled, right? Now I'm going back in with my catalyst wedge again because again, I want that chunky texture hinting at a abstracted sky. And so I'm laying down all these colors that we created from this color card, and I am largely eyeballing where I want the intensity of colors to go. Now, I can tell from the inspiration picture, and I can also tell from my own painting here, that the sun has set down behind the mountains or the hills or whatever that dark element is at the bottom of the painting. So that would mean that the sunlight is actually coming from below, optically speaking, right? So as I put these clouds in or these breaks in the cloud, depending on how you're looking at it, I have to be mindful that the highlighting will actually be at the bottom of clouds. So what I mean is the lighter colors will need to feel like they're coming from the bottom of the cloud as opposed to just randomly placed in places. So to get that effect, I may need to intensify some of the upper colors and then also maybe reduce the intensity or create a lighter color from the colors for the bottom of the clouds. Now, to do that effectively, I am using a long-handled flat brush, right? I'm not being perfect about any of this. I'm not worried about being perfect about it. I am just highlighting the clouds kind of where I feel like it needs to be in my own imagination. Again, I'm using the card as inspiration, not a directive. So this gives me a lot of creative freedom to move the paints around and create a story of my own using the colors from the color cube. Color Cube is awesome, and I could talk about it for hours. And if you would be interested in seeing other ways that I use the color cubes as a tool in my art practice, I would love to show you. Just tell me in the comments. But I'm starting to get a feel for this, and I'm really liking it. But what I want to do is I want to carve out this land mass at the bottom. I want to make it more thoughtful as opposed to an afterthought. So I went in with the flat brush, put in some paint, and now I'm softening that a little bit with the catalyst wedge. And I'm liking the direction that is going in. Now, it may be hard to see because of the lighting, but these dark areas, both at the bottom and at the top, have a lot of color going on in them through the layers. And like I said, it is a little bit difficult to see on camera, but that green that was not at all part of the color cube card and that I was so upset about is actually serving the sky and the landmass because it's making it more visually interesting instead of just a flat black or a flat blue black mass, right? And I love that. Now we're getting to some of the finer points here, right? So I'm going in, I'm darkening areas that I think maybe need a little more depth. I don't want this to be a quote unquote flat painting. I do want it to have dimension. I want it to have that essence of you're hiking in Arizona and this is what's happening at sunset. I don't really know because I haven't gone hiking in Arizona, but I have been to Arizona. So this is what I was talking about before about the highlighting below the clouds. Now, I don't know if you can see actual cloud formations here or not. In my mind, I do. And so with that, I am determining what is the bottom of a particular cloud and what's the top of another, just so I can go in and sort of zhuzh up this sky so it's not just so mm, black and white, if you will, like dark up top and then orange in the middle, and I want it more nuanced. Going in with the teal really helped me do this, and I have to be honest, I was quite nervous about it, again, because I am filming this and you're going to see what I do. But it ended up being, I think, the perfect foil for all this really heavy dark blue and the intensity of the orange. I love what the teal did in this. Now, that was not raw teal. That was mixed. That was a lower version, or I should say a lighter version of the last color on the color card. And I'll show that to you again in a minute so you can be refreshed about the original colors. But as I go in, I'm changing the positioning of my hand. So when I hold a brush like this that you're seeing right now, I have very little control over, what is going to come out, and I love that. That's exactly why I held the brush like that. When I hold the brush like a pencil, that is when I want to be very much in control of the output. When I feather it on, holding it from above, I prefer the effect. So what I'm going to do now is I'm happy with the color in relation to the inspiration piece. But I'm going to let it dry because who knows what's going to happen with these colors once until it's dry, right? So here it is. I let it dry completely. This is about an hour and a half later, and I put a matte board on it. I was just lucky I happened to have a matte board that was the right size for the painting, and I framed it out so that you can see it as a finished piece as opposed to just a color study, right? Your color studies can become finished pieces, but they don't have to. I want you to understand that. I didn't know that I was going to create this today. Actually, I was just really wanting to play with the colors. But I love what I did here, and I love the techniques that I explored. I'm going to shift it here because I think this camera angle actually shows the depth of color in the darker areas much better. You can see that green kind of coming up through the blue-black of the mountains or the landmass. All right, so I am done now with the color card, and Sarah Renee Clark did a great job of including a card with a tab on it. See that yellow, orange thing? And you can use that as a placeholder so you know exactly where to put your card back. Now, again, like I said, if you want to know more about the colored cube cards, I'm happy to show you other ways I use it. But in the meantime, if you want to hang out with the coolest group of artists on the internet and get all of my free resources, I would love it if you would join me in my free resources community. The link is in the description below. This is what I'd watch next.